The prairie heat pressed down like a hammer. The sun sat high, turning the rolling fields of dry grass into a shimmering sea of gold. Dust clung to the air, dry and bitter, and every step of Ethan Cross's horse kicked up clouds that refused to settle. Ethan pulled the reins, squinting at the horizon. His broad shoulders, sunburned skin, and scar that ran from his jawline to his neck marked him as a man carved by hard living. He'd fought in wars, driven cattle across endless plains, and buried more friends than he cared to count. But what gnawed at him now wasn't danger, it was the bone-deep loneliness of a man who had no home but the land beneath his boots. As he rode along the edge of a dry creek bed, something caught his eye. A splash of movement, small, uneven. Ethan slowed his horse, sliding the rifle from its scabbard. Out here, movement could mean anything. A rattler, a coyote, or troubled thought. Then he saw her. A woman lay crumpled against the cracked stream, her skin darkened by sun and dust, her long black hair tangled across her face. Her dress, buckskin and beadwork, told him what his gut already knew. She was Apache, and she was hurt bad. Ethan cursed under his breath. Helping her meant risk. The town of Red Bluff was already tight with fear of raiding parties. If they found him aiding a native, they'd string him up without a trial. But leaving her there under the blazing sun meant death. He swung down from his horse, boots crunching dry earth. She stirred weakly, her lips cracked and bleeding. Her eyes flicked open, sharp, defiant, even through the haze of pain. Water, she rasped, voice so faint he almost missed it. Ethan hesitated only a moment, then uncorked his canteen and lifted her head gently. The water spilled across her lips, and she drank like a starving deer. For a heartbeat, her hand caught his wrist stronger than he expected. Their eyes met, and in that moment, everything shifted. Her gaze wasn't pleading. It wasn't gratitude alone. It was fire, fierce suspicion tangled with something else, something unspoken. "You'll live," Ethan muttered, lowering her gently. He checked the wound in her side, a long gash, angry and raw, likely from a bullet. Whoever she'd escaped from, she hadn't gone down easy. He pulled a strip of cloth from his saddlebag and pressed it against the wound. She winced but didn't cry out. Her pride was steel. "You got a name?" Ethan asked quietly, though he didn't expect an answer. Her lips trembled before she whispered, "Ayoka." Ethan tied the makeshift bandage tight. "Well, Ayoka, you're lucky I came by." Her eyes narrowed, as if weighing his words, testing him for truth. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. She didn't trust him, but she wanted to live. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of blood red, Ethan made a choice. He couldn't leave her there. Not to the wolves, not to the heat, and sure as hell not to whoever had put that bullet in her. He hoisted her onto his horse, careful not to jostle her wound. She tensed but didn't resist. He mounted behind, steadying her against him as they rode toward his ranch. By nightfall, the prairie wind had cooled, whispering through the grass. The Cross Ranch came into view, a lonely house of weathered wood, a barn leaning under years of storms, and silence thick as the desert night. Ethan carried her into the barn, laying her gently on a bed of hay. Lantern light flickered, casting long shadows. He cleaned her wound again, his rough hands surprisingly careful. Her voice cut the quiet. "Why, help me?" He froze, then answered simply, "Because no one else would." Ayoka's eyes softened for just a second before hardening again. "My people will come." Ethan swallowed the weight of her words. He didn't know what she meant, not yet. That night, as coyotes howled in the distance and the lantern burned low, Ethan sat on a stool outside the stall where she slept, rifled across his knees. He didn't trust her. She didn't trust him. But between them hung an uneasy bond, one forged by water, blood, and silence. He didn't know it yet, but this single act of kindness had already lit a fire on the prairie that would bring hundreds to his door. Morning broke with the clang of the blacksmith's hammer in Red Bluff. Smoke curled from chimneys, dogs barked along the dusty street, and townsfolk bustled with the uneasy energy of people who sensed trouble was near. Ethan Cross rode in slow, hat pulled low, keeping his face unreadable. He tied his horse outside the general store, ignoring the stares that followed him. Folks already thought him strange, a man who kept to himself, living alone on a spread of land bigger than he could work. They whispered about his war scars, about his silence. Today, their whispers carried an edge sharper than usual. Inside the store, Clara Monroe stacked sacks of flour behind the counter. Her auburn hair was pinned neatly, though a strand slipped loose as she turned. Her eyes softened when they met Ethan's. "You're in early," she said. "Needed supplies," Ethan replied. His voice was gravel, worn from too many days without speaking. Clara studied him a moment longer. "Strange things happening outside town," she said carefully. "Tracks, sign of movement. The Marshal says Apaches are close." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Apache's been close for years. Not like this." She lowered her voice. "He says there's wounded among them. Means a raid went bad. Means they're desperate." Ethan shifted his weight, forcing his face blank. He could still see Ayoka in his barn, her wound wrapped in his torn cloth, her dark eyes flashing with pride even in pain. Before he could answer, the door slammed open. Marshal Donovan Hale strode in, tall and broad-shouldered, with a trimmed beard and eyes like polished steel. His badge gleamed in the lamplight. People instinctively stepped back when he entered. Donovan carried authority the way a rattlesnake carried venom, deadly and proud of it. "Listen up," Donovan barked. "There's Apache sign all over the valley. Broken branches, spent fires, tracks by the creek. They're close, and they're bleeding. That makes 'em dangerous." Murmurs spread. A woman clutched her child tighter. An old rancher spat into the sawdust. Donovan let the silence stretch before speaking again. "If any man here gives quarter to a savage, if anyone harbors one, he won't just answer to me. He'll answer to this town." His gaze slid across the room and stopped on Ethan. The weight of it pressed hard. Ethan returned the stare, saying nothing. Silence was his weapon, his shield. "See that you all remember," Donovan said. Then tipped his hat mockingly and left. The store slowly resumed its noise, but unease hung heavy. Clara approached Ethan, her voice low. "You wouldn't know," Ethan cut her off. Too fast, too sharp. He grabbed his supplies and left before she could see the truth flicker in his eyes. Back at the ranch, the barn was quiet except for the rustle of hay. Ethan pushed open the door, and Ayoka sat up slowly from her makeshift bed. Her wound was healing, though her skin still glistened with fever. "You went to town," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. Ethan set the supplies down. "Had to." Her eyes narrowed. "They know. They don't know about you," Ethan said, though his voice lacked certainty. Ayoka's lips curved in something between a smirk and a grimace. "They will." Ethan sat on a stool, elbows on his knees. "Why were you out there? Alone?" Her gaze sharpened. "Not alone. Attacked. Soldiers." He frowned. "Soldiers don't usually miss their mark." They didn't miss. She lifted her shirt just enough to show the scarred bandage at her side. "They killed 3 of mine. I crawled away." Her voice dropped lower, fiercer. "And now my people come." Ethan's stomach knotted. "Come, how many?" Her answer was like a thunderclap. "Hundreds." The word echoed in the barn, louder than the horses shifting in their stalls. Ethan stared at her, the reality sinking in. "You brought a war to my door," he said flatly. Her chin lifted. "You chose to give water. That choice binds you." For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick as smoke. Her eyes burned into his, a challenge, a warning, maybe even a strange respect. Ethan finally stood, pacing to the barn doors. He stared out at the horizon, where the prairie stretched endless and empty yet heavy now with unseen riders. A storm was coming. He felt it in his bones. And all he had done was tip a canteen to cracked lips. Through the dry grass like whispers of a secret carried from far away. Ethan Cross leaned on the fence rail, eyes scanning the horizon. The silence felt wrong, too heavy, too expectant. Inside the barn, Ayoka was stronger now. She stood carefully, testing her wounded side, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She caught Ethan's gaze when he returned inside. "You feel it," she said quietly. Ethan frowned. "Feel what?" "The ground, the air. They are coming." Before Ethan could answer, a sound rolled across the prairie, a low thunder that wasn't from the sky. Hoofbeats, countless hoofbeats. Ethan's heart dropped. He strode outside, and the sight froze him. On the ridge beyond his ranch, a dark cloud of riders crested the hill. The sun glinted off painted faces, feathers, spears, and rifles. Horses snorted and stamped, dust rising around them like smoke from a fire. It wasn't a raiding party. It was an army. Ayoka appeared beside him, her face unreadable. "My people." The riders fanned out across the plain, surrounding the ranch in a wide circle. At their head rode a tall man draped in buckskin, his long hair streaked with gray, his presence commanding, his eyes, sharp and unyielding, locked on Ethan. "Chief Tahoma," Ayoka whispered. The riders slowed, encircling the ranch house and barn. Ethan's horse reared nervously in the corral, sensing the tension. Ethan stood tall, though his hand itched for his rifle. But firing a bullet here would be like lighting a match in a powder keg. The circle parted, and Chief Tahoma rode forward with 2 warriors at his side. One of them, younger and fierce-eyed, carried himself with obvious authority. His gaze burned into Ethan like a blade. "That is Ravenwolf," Ioka murmured. "My father's right hand." Tahoma dismounted slowly, every movement deliberate. The ground seemed to hold its breath. He stepped forward, his voice deep as thunder. "Who gave water to my daughter?" Ethan's throat tightened. He felt every pair of eyes on him, hundreds of them, ready to decide his fate in a blink. He glanced at Ioka. Her chin lifted, daring him not to step forward, so he did. "I did," Ethan said, steady, his voice carrying across the circle. A ripple of anger surged through the riders. Ravenwolf spat on the ground. "Then you dishonored her. He is our enemy. He should die for touching her." Ioka stepped forward, her voice cutting like a whip. "Enough. This man saved me. I would be dead if not for him." Ravenwolf's hand went to his knife. Better to die with honor than owe life to him. Chief Tahoma raised a hand, silencing the murmur of warriors. His eyes never left Ethan. Ethan swallowed, then spoke. "Because she asked, because she needed help. I don't reckon color or blood changes what's right." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every warrior weighed his words. Ravenwolf snarled, "You speak like a liar. He hides poison in his tongue." Ioka's voice cracked like firewood. "I saw no poison. I saw mercy. If you kill him, father, you kill the truth of what I say." Tahoma's eyes flickered, just for a moment, to his daughter. Then he stepped closer to Ethan, so near the man could see the lines carved deep into his weathered face. "You give water to one of mine," Tahoma said slowly. "That water flows into my blood. That blood binds you, even if you do not want it." Ethan's jaw clenched. He didn't move. Tahoma turned back to his people, raising his arms. "This man lives. He is no enemy this day." A wave of unrest broke through the riders' shouts of disagreement, others of respect. Ravenwolf snarled openly, but he dared not defy his chief. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, but relief was short-lived. Tahoma's next words chilled him more than any threat. "But if he lies," Tahoma thundered, "if this is a trick, then all his people will burn." The riders let out a war cry that shook the very ground. Horses reared, spears rattled, voices rose like a storm. Then, just as quickly, the sound died. With a sharp gesture, Tahoma mounted again. He gave Ethan one last stare, piercing, unreadable. Before signaling his riders, the Apache army turned and swept back toward the hills, their dust cloud lingering in the air long after they vanished. The prairie was silent once more. Ioka exhaled slowly, her shoulders sagging. "You are alive because of me," she said, voice sharp, but her eyes held something softer. "Do not waste it." Ethan stared at the empty horizon, heart pounding. He had survived the day, but the war wasn't over. It had just stepped onto his doorstep. The sun had barely lifted when news spread like wildfire through Red Bluff. Farmers came down from their fields, ranchers left their cattle untended, and the blacksmith abandoned his anvil. Everyone crowded the main street, whispering of what they'd seen the night before. Hundreds of Apache riders circling Ethan Cross's ranch. By the time Marshal Donovan Hale strode out of the sheriff's office, the town was buzzing like a kicked beehive. He raised his hands, his voice carrying above the noise. "Folks," Donovan balked, "listen close. We've got a problem bigger than drought, bigger than cattle thieves. The Apache have massed right under our noses. Hundreds of them, armed to the teeth. And do you know where they rode?" All eyes locked on him. "To Ethan Cross's ranch." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman clutched her husband's arm, fear etched across her face. Donovan's tone hardened. "I saw it myself. They didn't ride on him, they rode around him. They spared him. Now you tell me, why would they do that, unless he's made some kind of bargain with them?" Murmurs turned to shouts. "Traitor," someone hissed. "He'll sell us out," cried another. From the back, Clara Monroe stepped forward, her voice firm though her hands trembled. "That's not fair, Marshal. You don't know what happened. Ethan's no traitor." Donovan's eyes narrowed. "You defending him, Clara?" "I'm saying he's a man who minds his own business," she shot back. "If the Apaches spared him, maybe they saw something in him worth sparing." A bitter laugh rolled from Donovan's throat. "Or maybe he's feeding them information. Maybe he's giving them supplies. And if that's true, every child, every family in Red Bluff is one step from the grave." The crowd roared in fear. leaning toward anger. Donovan seized it like a man roping a wild horse. So hear me plain. If Ethan Cross is with them, he's against us, and if he's against us, he'll hang. That night, the Cross Ranch sat under uneasy stars. Inside the barn, Ethan paced like a caged animal. He'd heard whispers in town, felt the weight of eyes on his back, seen the shift in Clara's face, loyal, but worried. Ioka watched him from her bed of hay, her wound nearly closed. She sat straighter now, strengths returning to her frame. They blame you, she said simply. Ethan stopped pacing. They're scared. Donovan's fanning the fire. Scared men kill faster than brave ones. Her words were blunt, unflinching. Ethan sat heavily on a stool, rubbing a hand over his stubbled jaw. What am I supposed to do? If I hand you over, they'll call me a murderer. If I keep you here, they'll call me a traitor. Her gaze burned into him. And if you do nothing, both sides will kill you. For a long moment, the barn was silent except for the creak of old wood and the distant howl of a coyote. Finally, Ethan asked, "Why did you speak for me? When Raven Wolf wanted my blood, why stop him?" Ioka's chin lifted proudly. "Because you gave me water, mercy, when you had no reason. My people believe debts of life are sacred. I told my father the truth." He listened. Her eyes softened, just a fraction. "But truth does not protect forever, my people. They will not all agree." Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "So what happens when your father can't hold them back?" She didn't answer, and the silence was heavier than words. Back in Red Bluff, Donovan lit a cigar in the back room of the saloon, his boots propped on the table. Across from him sat two hired guns, rough men with scars and hungry eyes. "You'll ride before dawn," Donovan said, smoke curling from his lips. "Find the Apache camp. Put a bullet in one or two. Scatter their horses. Light a fire. Make it look like Cross led you there." The bigger outlaw grinned, gold tooth glinting. "You aim to make him their enemy." Donovan's eyes gleamed like steel. "I aim to make him everybody's enemy. Town'll hang him. Apache'll kill him. Either way, Red Bluff sleeps safe." The men laughed low, collected their coin, and vanished into the night at the ranch. Ethan sat on the porch with his rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the dark horizon. He thought of Clara's worried face, of Donovan's venom, of Ioka's warning. He muttered to himself, voice rough, "I should have just ridden on by that day." But deep down, in the part of him he didn't speak aloud, Ethan knew he wouldn't have. Not then, not now. Because something about the way Ioka had clutched his wrist, eyes blazing even in weakness, had stirred a part of him long buried, the part that still believed in doing what was right even if it got him killed. And in the silence of the prairie, Ethan felt it. The storm was no longer coming. It was already here. The night was black and breathless when the first shots rang out, deep in the Apache camp. A horse screamed, arrows whistled, and fire licked the dry grass. Men shouted in their tongue, scrambling awake to find bullets tearing through the shadows. Two figures darted among them, Donovan's hired guns, rifles, flashing before they melted into the dark dot by the time silence fell. Two Apache warriors lay dead, a third bleeding out on the earth, and in the chaos, one of the attackers had dropped a worn leather glove stamped with a brand the Apache knew well, the Cross Ranch. At dawn, Ethan woke to the sound of hoofbeats again. He rose from the porch, rifle in hand, and froze. A wall of riders, Apache warriors painted for war, was bearing down on his land. Ioka rushed from the barn, face pale. "It has happened," she whispered. "Blood has been spilled." Ethan's stomach twisted. He tightened his grip on the rifle. "What are you saying?" Her voice cracked. "They believe it was you." The riders closed in. Arrows knocked, rifles raised. At their head was Raven Wolf, fury blazing in his eyes. Chief Tahoma rode beside him, grim as a storm. Raven Wolf shouted first, his words like venom. "We buried our brothers in the dirt last night, and we found your mark among the killers. This man is a snake. He brought death to us." The warriors roared their agreement, weapons raised. Ethan stepped forward, jaw set, heart pounding. "That wasn't me," he barked. "I never fired a shot. Someone's framing me." Raven Wolf sneered. "Lies from a coward's tongue." Ioka pushed between them, her voice sharp. "He speaks truth." Raven Wolf's face darkened. "You defend him still, even after our dead are cold in the ground." Chief Tahoma raised his hand, silencing the shouts. His eyes searched Ethan's, steady and piercing. "If you are innocent, prove it. Show us who seeks this war." Before Ethan could answer, another sound split the air, this time from the east. Soldiers, A column of cavalry thundered toward the ranch, dust rising behind them, and at their head, cool and smug in his saddle, rode Marshal Donovan Hale. The world seemed to stop as the two forces, the Apache and the soldiers, faced each other across Ethan's ranch. Donovan's voice rang out like a bell. There he is, crossed, the traitor who harbors savages on his land. He brought them to our door, and now he'll pay. The soldiers leveled their rifles. Raven Wolf's warriors lifted their bows and spears, and in the middle, Ethan Cross stood alone, his ranch, the battlefield, his name, the spark. Wait, Ethan shouted, raising his rifle skyward. He fired a single shot into the air. The blast cracked across the prairie, silencing both sides. Dust swirled around him as he strode forward, voice iron strong. You all want blood, but you're looking at the wrong man. Donovan's been pulling your strings, feeding fear to the town, sending killers to stir up war. You think he's saving Red Bluff. He's saving his own hide. Donovan's face twisted, but he kept his composure. Desperate words from a guilty man. Do you have proof? A shadow moved near the barn. Clara Monroe stepped forward, a satchel clutched to her chest. She'd ridden hard to get here, her face streaked with dust. Her voice shook, but it carried. I found these in Donovan's office, she said, pulling out a ledger and coins stamped with army insignia. Payments to hired guns, descriptions of Apache trails. He paid men to kill, then to pin it on Ethan. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Murmurs ran through the Apache riders. Ethan's eyes locked on Donovan. Your lies are burning out, Marshal. For a moment, the man's mask cracked. Fury blazed in his eyes. Then, with a snarl, Donovan drew his revolver. The world exploded. Ioka screamed. Clara ducked. Soldiers scrambled for cover as Raven Wolf's warriors loosed arrows. Ethan dove, rolling behind the corral fence as Donovan fired. A bullet splintered the wood inches from his head. Ethan rose and fired back, his shot grazing Donovan's arm. The marshal staggered, snarling, and fell behind a soldier's horse. Chaos tore the prairie apart. Gunfire, arrows, dust, war cries. In the midst of it, Chief Tahoma's voice thundered. Enough. The old warrior rode straight into the crossfire, raising his spear high. His command froze both sides, if only for a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, Ethan saw his chance. He stepped into the open, rifle leveled at Donovan, voice shaking with rage. This ends with you. Donovan's hand twitched toward his revolver, but hesitation cost him. Ethan fired. The shot rang out, striking Donovan square in the chest. He collapsed into the dust, his eyes wide with shock, blood spreading dark across his shirt. The battlefield went silent. Both soldiers and Apaches stared at the fallen marshal. One man's treachery, finally ended by the very rancher he sought to destroy. Ethan lowered his rifle, chest heaving. His eyes swept the prairie, the broken fences, the frightened horses, the smoke curling from trampled earth. He knew the fight wasn't finished. Trust between soldiers and Apache hung by a thread. But for the first time, both sides looked not at each other, but at him. The prairie was eerily quiet. Smoke drifted across Ethan Cross's ranch, curling from smoldering grass and shattered wood. Horses snorted nervously, blood stained the dust, and the cries of war had faded into uneasy silence. Donovan Hale lay still in the dirt, his eyes frozen wide in disbelief. For years, he had ruled Red Bluff through fear and charm, but now his power had ended in one ragged shot. Ethan lowered his rifle slowly, his arm trembling. He hadn't just killed a man, he had killed the very order that held this land together, corrupt as it was. Chief Tahoma dismounted, his boots pressing into the blood-soaked earth. His warriors watched, tense as bowstrings. The soldiers shifted nervously, their captain looking between Ethan and the Apache chief with uncertainty. All waited for the old man's judgment. Tahoma approached Ethan, his shadow long in the morning light. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, his deep voice rolled like thunder. You gave water to my daughter, he said. Then you gave blood to the earth. Both acts bind you. Ethan met his gaze, steady though his heart pounded. I didn't want this fight. Donovan pushed it here, but I'll stand by what I did. I won't apologize for saving her. A murmur ran through the warriors, but Tahoma raised his hand. His sharp eyes cut to his daughter, who stood behind Ethan, proud and defiant. Ioka, he said, is this man worthy of the life you defended? She stepped forward, shoulders squared, her dark eyes shining. He is. He gave when he had nothing to gain. He bled when he could have hidden. And he stood when both sides cursed his name. Raven Wolf spat on the ground, fury twisting his face. He is still white, still our enemy. Mercy now is weakness. Tahoma's voice cracked like a whip. Silence. The younger warrior flinched, but his glare never left Ethan. The chief turned back, his voice lowering into something heavier, almost reverent. This man is no Apache, but today, he is no enemy. Today, he is bound to us by water and blood. The Apache riders let out a low chant acceptance, mixed with unease. The soldiers weren't so easily swayed. Their captain nudged his horse forward, eyes narrowing. With respect, Chief, this man is still one of ours. He just shot a lawman. He'll answer for that. The tension snapped taut again. Apache hands gripped bows. Soldiers readied rifles. Ethan raised his voice before the spark caught flame. Donovan was no lawman. He was a snake who'd rather see us all dead than admit the truth. He framed me, framed this whole ranch, just to keep his power. He turned, his voice carrying to both sides. I ain't your enemy, not Apache, not soldier, not townsfolk. But if you keep looking for someone to hang, then maybe you'll never see the real danger, cumin. Clara Monroe, who had lingered near the fence line, stepped forward now, her voice clear. He's telling the truth. I saw Donovan's ledgers. If not for Ethan, we'd all be burning in this war already. The soldiers shifted uneasily. The captain's eyes flicked between his nervous men and the silent Apache. Finally, he lowered his rifle. We'll take this back to Fort Hayes. There'll be questions, but there'll also be answers. For now, we stand down. One by one, the soldiers backed their horses away. The Apache did the same, until the prairie once again was empty, save for dust and silence. That evening, Ethan sat on the porch of his battered ranch, rifle resting across his knees. Ayoka joined him, moving slowly but with strength returning. You are marked now, she said softly. Ethan gave a dry chuckle. Mark, by both sides. Some will see a traitor, others will see a bridge, but none will see just a rancher anymore. He stared at the horizon, where the last light of day bled into the land. I never asked for any of this. No one asks for rivers, she replied, but they still changed the land they touch. They sat in silence, the prairie wind brushing past. Finally, Ayoka spoke again, voice steady. You gave me water when I was dying. That gift binds me to you, and I will not break it. Ethan looked at her, seeing not just the woman he had saved, but the storm she had carried into his life. For the first time in years, his hardened heart softened. Then maybe, he said quietly, we'll find a way through this together. The stars burned above them, countless and eternal, as the prairie stretched on wild, unforgiving, and forever changed. And so was Ethan Cross.